We are continuing our study of the book of Daniel, and we've come to Daniel chapter 8, the ram and the he-goat. I don't know if any of you have ever had rams at home or goats, but I have. I've raised sheep and rams and goats, and I want to tell you that a ram is a very dangerous animal. And in my opinion, according to nature, a ram is tougher than a goat. But in our story of Daniel chapter 8, the he-goat is more powerful than the ram. We go to Daniel chapter 8, and we'll start with verse number 1, please. This is a very fascinating chapter, and it is an extension of Daniel chapter 7 and Daniel chapter 2. So we will read, and we'll start with Richard, please. Daniel chapter 8, verse 1. What does it say?
In the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first.
Okay, Daniel chapter 8, verse 1. We're studying the book of Daniel. We're in Daniel chapter 8, and it says, in the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. Now, Daniel chapter 8, you have to understand, reverts back to Hebrew. Verse 1, Hebrew is the major language now used from Daniel chapter 8, verse 1 till the end of the book of Daniel. In the book of Daniel, you have two different languages. This is a unique book. No other book I know of, with the exception possibly of the book of Matthew, that has been commented by many to have been written in Hebrew and then translated into Greek. This book was written in two languages. From Daniel chapter 2, verse 4, to the end of Daniel chapter 7, which is verse 28, it was written in Chaldean, in the language of the Babylonians. But from Daniel 1 to Daniel 2, chapter 2, verse 4, and from Daniel chapter 8, verse 1 till the end of the book of Daniel, it's written in Hebrew. It is for the Hebrews. It is to tell the Hebrews two very important statements. Please understand, the first coming of Christ and the second coming of Christ. It's all about Jesus. Daniel chapter 9 is going to tell us mathematically when Jesus needs to be baptized and when he needs to die on the cross. And Daniel chapter 11 is going to tell us when Jesus is going to return, Messiah, and Michael shall stand up in the end of the world. So this is written in Hebrew, the sacred language that God gave to them. And now Daniel says, a vision appeared unto me. Now this is significant that he says unto me, because the other dreams did not appear unto them. They appeared unto Nebuchadnezzar. In chapter 2, it was Nebuchadnezzar who had the dream, like Pharaoh who had the dream in the time of Joseph. It was Nebuchadnezzar who had the dream of that great image, world history. It was Nebuchadnezzar who had the dream of the great tree that was cut. But now it's Daniel who starts having dreams. And he has this in the third year of Belshazzar. What does that mean? That's the year that the king... That means that year Belshazzar would be killed. He would be slain. And the Persians with the Medes would take over Babylon. So this was written the same year that Belshazzar would be dethroned. Now think for a moment. We just studied a couple of days ago Daniel chapter 6, where Daniel is called in to read the writing on the wall. Daniel is given this vision of the ram and the he-goat before the writing on the wall. Before the writing on the wall. So he sees this dream, this vision, and he understands that after Babylon is going to come Persia, and he is in Shushan. He is in the capital city of Elam. He is in the capital city of the ancient Elam, which is very powerful, who is part of the kingdom of Media. Elam and Media joined together eventually. So we find that Daniel now sees this vision. Verse 2. I jumped the gun a little bit, but Danny, please. Daniel chapter 8, verse 2, what does it say? Then I saw in a vision.
And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai.
Ulai. Thank you. So he's in the vision, he's in the palace. Why was he in the palace in Shushan if already Shushan had been conquered by Cyrus, and the prince of that city had joined Cyrus? Haskell writes, S.N. Haskell, who was a Seventh-day Adventist who wrote the Seer of what is the title of this book? Let's see. Well, it's the book of Daniel. Originally, it was titled The Story of Daniel the Prophet. He says, Elam under Abradates, the viceroy or prince, had revolted from Babylon and joined the forces of the Persians. So they had already revolted. They have joined the Persians, and here is Daniel. Was he trying to arrange peace? Was he sent by the king as a truce representative? Was he there on commerce, buying and selling? Was he trying to arrange something? I don't know, but he was there with a, we say in Spanish, salvoconducto, which is, in English, salvoconducto is a pass, where a truce, he's there on a truce. Daniel is there in Shushan under a truce that he will not be harmed. And he has this vision. Now when you read the Jews, the rabbis say, you know, when you read Daniel chapter 7, it's concentrating on Babylon, the first beast, and the last beast, Rome. But in Daniel chapter 8, the focus is on the second and the third beast. The second and the third beast, the bear and the leopard, which here turn into be the ram and the he-goat. The emphasis is on them. And the Persians had three major cities. Shushan was the winter palace. So if it was winter, that's where the Persian kings went. And Ecbatana was the summer residence, and they also spent time in Babylon. But Xenophon, who was the Greek historian, says that Shushan was the winter residence of the Persian kings. Let's read about Elam in the Bible. Isaiah chapter 21, verses 2 and 3. Leo, please, Isaiah chapter 21, verses 2 and 3. And Damaris, you look up Jeremiah 49:39. 49:39. I want you to know that Elam was a very powerful kingdom. Isaiah 21. 21, 2 and 3.
A grievous vision is declared unto me. The treacherous dealer dealeth treacherously, and the spoiler spoileth. Go up, O Elam, besiege, O Media, all the signing thereof have I made to cease. Therefore are my loins filled with pain. Pangs have taken hold upon me, as the pangs of a woman, and that travaileth. I was bowed down at the hearing of it. I was dismayed at the seeing of it.
Dismayed at the seeing of it, that's right. It's talking about the fall of Babylon. Read verse 9. It says, And behold, here cometh a chariot of men with a couple of horsemen. And he answered and said, Babylon is fallen, and all the graven images of her gods he hath broken unto the ground. So it was already foretold by Isaiah, and Isaiah lived over 100 years. If you could get me some batteries, please, from back there. Isaiah lived about 100 years before Cyrus the Great. And he is foretelling that Elam would join Cyrus and Media would join Cyrus, the Persians, to attack and to destroy Babylon. So you need to add on verse 9 that says that Babylon is fallen. Let's go to Jeremiah. Jeremiah 49:39. What does it say?
But it shall come to pass in the latter days that I will bring again the captivity of Elam, saith the Lord.
The captivity of Elam. So Elam is mentioned there in Jeremiah. If you go ahead and install those for me. Jeremiah, who is after Isaiah, tells us and all these verses are really talking about Elam from verse 34 on. The word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet against Elam in the beginning of the reign of Zedekiah king of Judah. I will break the bow of Elam, the chief of their might. And upon Elam will I bring the four winds from the four quarters of the heavens, and will scatter them toward all those winds. And there shall be no nation whither the outcasts of Elam shall not come. And verse 39, but it shall come to pass in the latter days that I will bring again the captivity of Elam. So Elam is going to play a role even in the last days. Elam belongs to Iran. All right, we're now in Daniel chapter 8, verse 1 and verse 2. Let's go to Daniel, please. We've read that in the third year of the reign of Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto Daniel, not unto Nebuchadnezzar. That was the last year before Belshazzar was killed. And in verse 2 it says that he was in Shushan, which was the capital of Elam, next to the river Ulai. Now this river Ulai is divided in two branches according to Farrar, into two other small rivers. And I think it's significant because Elam was going to be part of Media and part of Persia, two kingdoms that would unite. Now, what do rivers have? What do rivers have? Water, thank you. Revelation 17:15. What does water a symbol of?
Multitudes of people.
Multitudes of people, that's right. So these are multitudes of people that are going to take place in war. Verse 3, Daniel 8, verse 3. Adrian, please. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw.
Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had two horns, and the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came off last.
Now, how significant? It's a ram with two horns, and one horn came up higher than the other. It's the same idea of Daniel chapter 2. In Daniel chapter 2, the head was of gold. What was the chest and the arms of?
Silver.
Silver. And how many arms did the statue have? Two. And do each of us have a stronger arm? Yes. And when I look at my arms, my right hand is harder than my left arm. Left hand. If I'm going to fight, I'm going to hit a couple times with my left. I'm going to come with the right really strong. Okay? But we're peaceful people. We don't fight. The Lord fights our battles. But these two arms symbolize Media and Persia. Media hits first, okay? The Medes, they go first into the kingdom. Then the Persians come and give the knockout. Wow. Now, when we go to Daniel chapter 7, it was a bear, and he was higher on one side than the other. When you look at a bear, isn't that so? You see him crawling on all four. He has one side bigger than the other. Did you know that you have 1 foot higher, bigger than the other? Yes, each of you has one foot, just a little bit bigger than the other. And some people I know, they need to buy 2 different sizes of shoes in order to fit them. Daniel chapter 7, verse 5. Eric, please, Daniel 7:5 with the bear. One was higher than the other.
And behold, another beast, the second, like to a bear. It raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Rise, devour much flesh.
Okay, so it raised up itself on one side. The side that raises up is the Persians. The Persians always respected the Medes, but they held the power after Darius the Mede. Now, it says here that it had horns. What is a horn a symbol of? Power. And what else? A what? Power, force. What else is a horn a symbol of? A king. Thank you. Daniel chapter 7, verse 24. Daniel 7:24. What does it say, Richard? 7:24. The 10 horns of this kingdom.
And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings.
10 kings. 10 horns equals 10 kings. So 1 horn equals how many kings? 1 king. That's right. So here you have 2 kingdoms that have joined together, the Medes and the Persians. And Cyrus had blood of royalty from the Medes, and Cyrus had blood of royalty from the Persians. We go to verse 4. Mark Anthony, please. Verse 4. And I saw the ram.
I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will and became great.
Okay. Verse 4 is very significant. It says, it is pushing where? North. It's going north. Okay. Which other way is it going? South. Okay. And it's going what else? West. So which way is it coming from? Where is it coming from? East. That's right. There's only one other option. East. It's coming from the east. This ram. From Media, from Iran, from Iraq today. From the lands of Elam, Media, Assyria, Babylon. And it's going west. It's pushing. It's ramming. Butting, as you will. Have you seen the rams when they fight over a female? How they butt heads? Oh! They just go and go and go and go. I had a little ram at my home. Yes, lived at my house. You know, people have cats, they have dogs. Well, I had rams in my house inside. And so we had this mirror, this closet with glass, and you saw that little baby. It was a baby. It was very cute. And it started to get its horns out, and it would see itself in the glass, and it would bang into it. It would bang into it, just butt into it. Later, as it grew bigger, I put him outside of the house in the backyard. You know, people have dogs and they have cats. I had donkeys and rams and sheep in the city in Tampa. And I'd put out my hand toward this little ram, and it would jump up and butt into my hand. It would just jump, take a few steps back, and fire himself forward. His name was Lalo, and Lalo became a very evil ram. Very evil. It was treacherous. It almost killed my dad. He got so dangerous we had to sell him away. He was a real danger. And so was this ram. It says, no beast could stand before its way. It conquered every land. It took over Egypt. It took over Palestine. It took over Asia Minor. And it was going west. Now listen to me. I'm going to say 3 very important things. The first thing, all of the movements of kingdoms have been from east to west. That's principle number 1, from east to west. the land of the rising sun, Japan, China, the great empires of the past, Syria, then Babylon, then Persia, then you move to Greece, then Rome, then the powers of Europe, Spain, England, and then the United States, and then what happens? The day ends. Now another principle is that an empire was dominated by two kingdoms. And these two kingdoms were dominated by a nation. And that nation was dominated by a city. And the city was later dominated by tribes. By tribes. And the tribes were dominated by a desert place. Who was the empire? Babylon. Who were the two kingdoms? Media and Persia. Who was the nation? Greece, the nation of Greece and Macedonia. What was the city that overcame Greece? Rome, the city, the eternal city. For 2,000 years, Rome has dominated the world. Now they're waiting for the third millennium, where Rome will go into its third phase. And Rome was dethroned by the tribes. These were by barbarians. Barbarian tribes that came down from Sweden, the Goths, that later divided into the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths, Norway, Sweden, Finland. All those Nordic people came down and destroyed Rome. And then the Eastern barbarians came over and destroyed Rome. The Asian descendants, not just the Huns, but I think in terms of the Middle Ages with the great Khan, who had a remarkable empire in his own lifetime. And then the powers of Europe have been dominated and influenced by a desert place here, which is called America, or the beast with two horns. Two horns like a lamb that snores like a dragon. Be careful, this nation has atomic bombs. The only nation in the history of the world that has used atomic bombs to our knowledge. We don't know about the antediluvians. They used the atomic bomb. So this is the second, a more disorganized, smaller people have overcome a greater, more organized civilization. What do you see here? You see evolution in reverse. This is a degeneration. A degeneration. That's what you see. A degradation. Who could think of a city overcoming an empire? It's unheard of. One city, Rome, overtook the whole world. The eternal city. Small beginnings. They go very far. And all the movements of the world have been just like the movement of the sun. As the sun is born in the east, and goes down in the west, so have the powers that have governed the world. God has given every region of the world an opportunity to govern the world, and they have all ceased to give him glory. Notice something. That the nations in the east have suns on them. Does Korea have a sun in their flag?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Korea. It doesn't have. Does Japan have a sun? Japan has a sun. Philippines also has a sun. Philippines has a sun. Now what about here in the West? What do we have? We have stars.
I have a maple leaf too.
Stars. Stars. Cuba has 1 star. Puerto Rico has 1 star. America has 50 stars. Chile has a star.
Venezuela has stars.
What?
Venezuela.
Venezuela has a star. All these flags with stars. You know, I think that's significant. These people in the East are from the beginning of time. These people in the West are the end of time. This is the new world. That's the old world. Now, this is really fascinating. Number 3, our writing in the West, we write from west to east. In the East, they write from east to west. The Chinese start at the east, and they go west. They go down. They go up and down or sideways. The Egyptians to the left. The Arabs to the left. The Hebrews to the left. But the Greeks changed it all. The Greeks, the Latins, have influenced our language that now we write from west to east, from left to right. What does that mean? We're living in the end of time. We're living in the time when the sun goes down, when the history of the world will end. These are certain principles that you see that are irrefutable. The whole existence of our human history, from the flood till the end of time, from the flood of water to the flood of fire, is from east to west. Now, we read in Daniel chapter 8, verse 4, it says, and the ram pushing eastward and northward and southward, so it comes from the east, so that no beast might stand. What is a beast a symbol of? What is a beast a symbol of? A kingdom, that's right. Read Daniel chapter 7, verse 17. 7:17. Danny? Daniel 7:17. What does it say? These great beasts.
These great beasts, which are four kings, which shall rise out of the earth.
That's right. So 4 beasts or 4 kings. 1 beast is what? Is 1 kingdom. So no kingdom could stand in the way of the Medes and the Persians. And God uses these beasts, which are really the union of religion with the state. Religion with the state. That's a beast. Where you lose liberty of religion, liberty of speech, liberty of press. And it acts like an animal. The nation acts like an animal to devour everything in its path. We read in the scriptures that he became great. That's the 4th principle we're going to look at. He became great. We're going to look at a couple of verses. Verse 4, verse 8, and verse 9. Let's read those 3. Richard, Danny, and Eric. I want you to highlight the adjectives before the word great in each of these verses, because they represent 3 different powers that govern the world. 3 different powers. They're all great powers, but each one has a different adjective before it. Richard, you read the first. Daniel 8:4. 8:4. The last part. What does it say?
Last part.
But he
did according to his will and became great.
So he became great. Who is this ram of 2 horns? We read in verse 20. The ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia. So Media and Persia are the 2 horns. The Bible says it. It explains it. Media and Persia. Now we're going to read the next one. Verse 8. Danny, what does it say? Therefore the he-goat.
Therefore the he-goat waxed very great.
Very great. Now what is more? Great or very great?
Very great.
Very great. Okay, now he's a he-goat. The he-goat. And we read in the scriptures in Daniel chapter 8 verse 21, and the rough goat is the king of Greece. Greece. So from Persia we go to Greece. And Greece was even greater in extension and land extension than the Persian Empire. The Greek Empire was even greater in its extension. Now we go to the ninth one.
And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great.
Exceeding great. Exceeding. So now we have the little horn. We studied the little horn in Daniel chapter 7. But the little horn here, I want you to know, in all these verses, they have double application. Double application. The angel tells us who that little horn is. Verse 23, and in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king. That horn is a king of fierce countenance, and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. There's a king. I tell you what king. The greatest of all kings. Caesar. And the Pope. Under pagan Rome. And under papal Rome. The Pope carries a triple crown. You know why he carries a triple crown? Because he is king of heaven, he is king of earth, and he is king of hell. He has dominion over the demons in hell, over the kings on earth, and over Jesus in heaven. Not even Jesus can resist his power. That is the official teaching of the Church of Rome. When the priest pronounces the words in Latin at the Mass, Jesus must leave his throne in heaven and be crucified again. And that priest, under the power of the Bishop of Rome, has power over Jesus Christ, has more power than Mary herself. Exceeding great. Rome, that city, overcame a greater landmass than did any of the empires before. It took all of northern Africa. It took all of known Europe, civilized Europe. All the way up to England and Spain, Rome reached with its armies. Julius Caesar went to France and conquered it. And what about the papacy? Papacy went even greater. Even greater. We say in Spanish, they reached La Conchinchina. Conchinchina. That means the farthest place of China. The papacy reached the Philippines, and they became Catholic. It reached Vietnam, and they became Catholic. Through the boats of the Portuguese, they went all around. Even in India, they became Catholic. It was exceeding great. When there was a conflict between Spain and Portugal, they appealed to the Pope. You need to decide whose lands belong to who. And the Pope said, after this parallel, everything to the west will belong to Spain. And that's why most of Latin America speaks Spanish. But from this line, everything to the east belongs to Portugal. And that's why Brazil speaks Portuguese. And in Africa, you have nations that speak Portuguese with millions of people, like in Angola, like in Mozambique. And even in parts of India, they spoke Portuguese for a long time. And they reached even China and Japan with Catholicism. Exceedingly great, that king with a fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences. When they would see Caesar, they would say, "Hail Caesar!" You know what that means, Hail Caesar? Salvation in Caesar. Caesar was not just the emperor, he was the Summo Pontifice, the Supreme Pontiff. That was his title. Supreme Pontiff. You know who took this title? The Pope took that title, the Supreme Pontiff. I have a coin that dates to the time of Tiberius Caesar. In his day, Jesus was crucified. And we're going to read about this in Daniel chapter 8, about Messiah. And on one side of that coin, you have the face of Tiberius Caesar. And on the other side, you have Tiberius Caesar sitting on a throne with a staff. And over it, it is written, Supreme Pontiff. The high priest of all of paganism was Caesar. And the Pope became the high priest of Catholicism. And he claimed to be the father of all Christians. That's why he's called Pope. Pope from Papa. In Spanish, you used to call him Papa. El Papa. El Papa is the same word we use to call a father. We call him Papa. What are you saying in Italian, Papa? Papa. Same, Italian. Italian is even closer to Latin. It means father. So we see that the Persians were great. The Greeks were very great. But Rome, in its two phases, was exceeding great. Now, there's going to be a third phase of Rome. Did you know that? There's a third phase of Rome. And that's going to be American Rome. When America takes over the lands that used to be part of the kingdom of the let me pronounce this right, of the Seleucus of Syria, then it will become the new king of the north. It will exercise its power all around the globe. Let's go to verse 5, please. Daniel chapter 8, verse 5. Mark Anthony, please. Daniel chapter 8, verse 5. And as I was considering, behold.
And I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes.
I love this text. I mean, it says this rough goat. It says here, came from the west. Came from the west. Now, the points, the cardinal points are all in reference to Jerusalem, the center of the world, and Israel, Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. All the points, everything that's north, that's south, that's east, and that's west. And it came from Macedonia. The Greek Empire became great because of Alexander. Alexander was the son of Philip. Philip was the king of Macedonia. When Philip died, Alexander was 20 years old. And he came south from Macedonia into the Greek states, and he united all of the Greek states. This 20-year-old supreme commander, and he starts out to conquer the world. In 5 years, he will conquer all of the world. 5 years. He'll continue to fight and conquer more. But he will destroy the Persian empires in 5 years. At 25, how would you like to be 25? Anybody here is 25? Raise your hand. Imagine, Richard, imagine Eric, 25 years old. Anybody else 25? Okay, Emelina. Let's say you're now the supreme ruler of the world at 25. You decide everything. Politics, religion, education, everything. Everybody kneels at your feet. Your word is supreme. You are God on earth, so to speak. So was Alexander. Alexander the Great. You know, Julius Caesar had a hero. As children, we have heroes. And when I was a little boy in the Baptist church, I had heroes. Spider-Man and Superman. You know, I grew up and they're no longer my heroes. I really want to have Bible heroes. Jesus is my hero today. But Julius Caesar had a hero, and it was Alexander the Great. He wanted to be like Alexander the Great. 25 years old, conquering the world. The world at his feet. We read it here in verse 21. Daniel chapter 8, verse 21. The rough goat is the king of Greece, and the great horn between his eyes is the first king. He's called the great horn, the great king. Everybody loved to fight under Alexander. You know why? Because he never lost a battle. He never lost. He always went to war and never lost. He's on this white horse with his sword, leading his armies forward. He was a tremendous soldier. Unbeatable. They never lost. They're always ready for a new battle because they knew they would win. Alexander's with us, we will win. And he had generals all around him. And he came from the west, and it says he moved so fast he touched not the ground. Touched not the ground. So imagine this he-goat that's just jumping and flying across. Imagine if you could run so fast that you didn't touch the ground. You know how fast you could go? You don't have that traction, all this earth that slows you down. You could just fly. He flew. Alexander divided his army in two. One to carry the ammunition and the food, and a smaller army to attack. He crossed the mountains. He crossed rivers. Unbeatable. Now it's significant that the goat, the Bible says that he is the he-goat. You know, Alexander came from Macedonia and Greece, and the national animal of Macedonia was the goat. And Alexander was so happy about the goat, he named his son the goat. Imagine, Eric, if you had a son and you named him the goat. He named his firstborn son Alexander the Goat. That's what he was called. Alexander Goat. And there is a sea in front of Greece, and it's called the Goat Sea. The Aegean Sea. That's in Greek, that means goat, Aegean. So we have this remarkable evidence of the goat being related to Greece. The rabbis say that Alexander the Great is that horn. And in Daniel chapter 11, verse 3, he was so powerful. Look what Daniel chapter 11, verse 3 says. Adrian, please, can you read that for us? And a mighty king shall stand up. He comes from Greece.
And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will.
He would do according to his will. Whatever he wanted, he had. Nothing could stand in his way. And Alexander influenced the world with Greek culture. I want you to know that that Greek culture has even reached the United States. You go to Washington, D.C., you see Greek architecture. You go to American universities, you see Greek universities. Greek philosophy. You study Socrates and Plato's and all these great Greek philosophers. And Pythagoras. You study math in Korea and you have to study the Pythagorean theorem. It comes from the Greeks. Knowledge comes from the Greeks. Archimedes said, give me a plank and I'll move the world. And he had all these formulas for cylinders. That's Greek. And medicine, Greek. You go in, you study medicine, you're going to have all these words in Greek. The language of the Greeks has remained. The culture of the Greeks, the philosophy of the Greeks, the medicine of the Greeks, the educational system, the civilization. The Greeks, the states. It's a Greek concept. The republic, it's a Greek concept. And when Rome came into being, you know, there's this big controversy because the Latins didn't want to be under the Greeks. And the Greeks would say, we're older. We have it all. And so Virgil, the great historian of the Latins, came up with this theory, and it may be true. He said, listen, we are Greeks. Rome is a descendant of Troy. Troy, the city that the Greeks attacked and took over. And from Troy, Romulus and Remus came to Rome and established the city of Rome, and they were raised by this wolf. There were these wolf boys, these wolfmen. One of them died and one of them survived and established the city of Rome. We are descendants of the Greeks. We're as old as the Greeks. That's what Virgil said. Among the 7 hills, the city of Rome was established by the ancient descendants of Troy. We read in the scriptures in Daniel chapter 8 that we go to verse 6. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns. Read that, Damaris. Daniel chapter 8, verse 6. And he came to the ram, this he-goat, Greece with all its power, its smaller army. The Persians had hundreds of thousands of soldiers. The Greeks didn't have that many soldiers, and they still overcame. Yes?
And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him with the fury of his power.
With the fury of its powers. There's a number of battles. Can I erase this here? You have these concepts down? These 3 concepts. East or west are the movement of the empires. From lower civilization to higher civilization, lower groups have always overcome those of higher groups. And the writing has been also from right to left, and then eventually from left to right, showing the passage of time like the sun. And we read in all its furies. There were several great wars, and we want to cite them, in which Alexander just attacked in all his fury. One of the great wars was at the Granicus River. The year was 334 BC. This was in Phrygia, Asia Minor. And Alexander and his troops were coming from the west, and on the east were the generals of Darius. And Darius sent a note with his generals, please capture that man and bring him to me. Darius wasn't even there in the battle. And there was a river between both of them. Just like the scripture says, they came to the river. It says before the river. They were at that river. And Alexander's army swam across the river. They swam. Everybody jumped in the water with their horses and just swimming. And they're all wet. And they cross the other side and they start fighting the Persians. And they defeated them. Totally defeated them. The next great battle was the Battle of Issus. And this is 333 BC. Now Darius says, no, this is getting serious. I'm going to be there. Darius, the emperor, was there in his chariot. And he had hundreds of thousands of soldiers to withstand Alexander. He gathered more soldiers to stop Alexander. And they found this beautiful mosaic in Pompeii. Maybe you've seen it. Where Alexander with his beard, riding his white horse, raising his sword. And on the other side is Darius the Great. Darius the Third. Not the Great. Darius the Emperor the Third. This was not the great Darius. He was the last of the Persian kings. And he's in his chariot, and he's trying to run away. He's trying to get away from Alexander. He was unstoppable. This mural is from Pompeii, the city of Pompeii, and it was discovered there. The Romans really had great admiration for Alexander the Great and for everything that was Greek. And the Romans wanted to be Greeks. They absorbed the religion of the Greeks, the culture of the Greeks. And Greek was still the major language of philosophy in writing. If you wanted to write something, you wrote it in Greek. It was important. It was the language of the people. And that's why God sent his New Testament in Greek. Sent it in Greek. That's why God translated the Old Testament into Greek. It was the common language. It has always been the desire of God that his gospel, that his message will be known in the language of the people. We have two more great battles. Tyre. Tyre had been invaded by Babylon, by Nebuchadnezzar. And you know what the people at Tyre did? They took boats and went to the island. And Nebuchadnezzar spent years trying to take Tyre. He could only take the coastal city. He couldn't reach the island city of Tyre. The island city of Tyre was there with Alexander. And they thought they were going to overcome Alexander like they had overcome Nebuchadnezzar. They were an island. They would not be taken. Wrong. The Greeks are expert sailors. Alexander built a bridge, a land bridge, all the way to Tyre. And they destroyed Tyre. They burnt it. He did according to his will. Nothing could stand before him. And so now he comes to Tyre, 332, and he takes and destroys Tyre, which is a symbol of the devil. So here Alexander acts like a Messiah from God, sent of God. This is a foreshadow of Jesus overcoming the devil, the prince of Tyre. Lucifer will be defeated in his own place, in his own land. Jesus overcame the devil in heaven, and he comes down to earth as a babe, and he overcomes the devil here on earth. He will throw them in the lake of fire after the 1,000 years. And then we go, before we get to the fourth and great battle, we must mention what Josephus says, and with this story we'll take a break. Josephus tells us that in his Antiquity of the Jews, book 11, chapter 8, in the book that I have, it's page 244 and 245. Here comes Alexander the Great with his army before Jerusalem. The high priest was Jaddua. Jaddua dresses in his white linen clothes. He puts on his mitre that says holiness to the Lord. And he has his ephod and he has his breastplate. And he comes dressed in the dress of the high priests. And the priests are behind him and the Levites. And they're blowing the shofar. And they're all dressed in white and they're approaching Alexander the Great. And here's Alexander on his white horse. And he meets them. This is a true story. Josephus tells it. And Alexander gets off his horse. He comes up to the priests and he kneels before the priests and bows before him. And one of his generals, Alexander's general, says, "What's gotten into you?" He comes up to him and says, "Alexander, what are you doing? How can you bow before this Hebrew priest? What's wrong with you?" The general's name was Parmenius. Parmenius says, "What are you doing, Alexander? How can you bow before this Hebrew priest? If people all over the world bow before you, how are you going to bow before somebody else?" And then Alexander the Great says, "I had a dream when I was 20 years old. And in the dream I saw this priest dressed in white coming to meet me in this parade. And I did not bow before the priest. I bowed before the name of the God that's written in his mitre, in his crown. Holiness to Jehovah. Before the name of Jehovah he bowed down." And so the high priest invited him into Jerusalem and he showed him the scriptures. He showed him the book of Daniel. Imagine, there is Alexander the Great. There are the writings of Daniel. And this high priest opens to him and it says, "Alexander, I want you to read Daniel chapter 8, verse 21. It says, 'And the rough goat is the king of Greece, and the great horn between his eyes is the first king. He read to him verse 21. And then he read chapter 8, verse 5. And I was considering, and behold, the he-goat came from the west. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram, in verse 6, and ran unto him the fury of his power. And verse 7, and I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler with anger against him, and smote the ram, and brake his two horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him. And there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. And Alexander says, that's me. Your God has prophesied of me. You know, the Greeks have these legends of writings of prophecy, of telling the future, of dark sentences. And here, the priest reads to him from Hebrew. He translated it into the language of the Greeks. The Old Testament had not been translated yet. Now, the irony of this story is that Alexander did not become a Christian. He did not become a Jew. He was not converted. He didn't want to become the Son of God. He went down into Egypt. In Egypt, he conquered Egypt. He established the city of Alexandria, and there he was proclaimed Jupiter Ammon. Jupiter Ammon. Ammon, the sun god. Jupiter Ammon. He wanted to be a son of the pagan gods. He didn't want to be a son of God. And that same encounter comes to us. Do you know that you're in the Bible too? That the 144,000 are written as a special number, and that God has called you to be part of that number? And they overcame by the blood of the Lamb. They overcame the world, and overcame the devil, and overcame sin, and overcame themselves. We're in the Bible. Jesus saw us, and he prayed for us. I pray not only for these that believe on me, but those that will believe through them. And they follow the Lamb whither they go. They have a special place. Their names are written in heaven. God has written your name in heaven. Your new name is written on this table of gold that Ellen G. White saw. It's there written. Not the names of the great multitude, but our names are written there. To whom the ends of the world have come before the great battle between the great controversy between light and darkness, between yin and yang, the light and the darkness, between sin and righteousness. And if we reject the light of God, we will become also the children of pagan gods, of pagan demons. When we come back, we'll finish the life of Alexander and move on to the other great empire that was exceeding great. But we've mentioned how very great this empire was. We have one more battle, and that's the Battle of Arbela, where Alexander is going to defeat Darius and become the supreme ruler at 25 years old. We'll take a break. Thank you.